here is one, Chris. Will we get views the entire way, or will it cut out because it's a military payload? We know sometimes we've got those
Yeah.
classified missions where they cut the camera after stage
Yeah.
sub.
Not in this case, because it's not classified. Even though it's military, we will see it through ULA will be live through deployment, and
Good
they have published,
deal.
and they have actually published the not just the timeline for exactly when everything will happen, even after payload separation. They have actually provided the final orbit that Centaur will leave Sbirs in for us. So yeah, not classified at all. We'll see it throughout the whole thing.
All right. A good question there, Tiger Time. You've seen a couple launches, it sounds like, so thanks for putting that one in there. I like this. Dr. J said it's McJeb's Scottish cousin is McJeb.
There we go. I'm going to go with, like, that was part of my Scottish ancestry for pronunciation.
There you go.
There.
Yeah.
Clanbaird.
So here's a discussion about RD-180s. This is LED Rocket saying how many RD-180s are left in the inventory, because this uses an outsourced engine. Can I call it that?
No, I'm not sure I'd call it outsourced engine. It's a good question. We don't actually think there are any left in reserve that aren't claimed for missions at this point. That's based on some math about how many that were said were left over and how many have now been grabbed because of the Kuiper constellation. I always say that differently than everyone else, but I can't say it the other way. I'm sorry. The Kuiper constellation for Amazon grabbed a lot of them. We don't actually think there are any, or if there are very, very few left in reserve that haven't been claimed at this point. So, you know, this is all part of the tricky balancing act of phasing out the Atlas while Vulcan is still flying. And now, to be clear, like, the Atlas will still be flying a few years from now. It's not like it's going away at the end of this year or next year, but its service life is limited at this point, especially as Vulcan starts to come on. The other thing we're not certain about, though, that is an answer, that is partially an answer to the RD-180 question, we were talking about this behind the scenes, is we know there's a moratorium, especially for national security missions, in terms of buying more. We don't know if there's a moratorium on, like, commercial procurement of them for commercial rockets. We were under that impression, but in all fairness, we're not sure if that moratorium on buying them from the U.S. government is only for military missions or extends to civilian missions as well.
Gotcha. And to clarify really quickly, so United Launch Alliance doesn't actually build their own engine for the bottom of the rocket. They buy those engines from Russia, right? And there are some rules about how many they can buy, and are they allowed to buy more, and can they use them on certain missions. So that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about the RD-180s and how many are left, it's because United Launch Alliance does not make those. They source them, or they buy them from somewhere else for use on their rockets, right?
Yeah, it's basically like, you know, like the RL-10 that they use on the Centaur upper stage is bought from Aerojet Rocketdyne. The RD-180 is bought from Energomesh. The BE-4 engines that will be used on the core stage of Vulcan are bought from Blue Origin. ULA just doesn't make their own engines. They just buy them, which is why I would say outsourcing isn't... I wouldn't say outsourcing. I'd just say it's no different than how they buy the other engines that they use on their rockets, except the U.S. Congress has a problem because it's a Russian engine.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's see here. Continuing to grab some more chats. Here's one. Why do they load the RP-1 into the Atlas 5 weeks or days before the launch? William McDaniel is asking.
Great question. So this is actually one of those moments where, because the Atlas doesn't use cryogenic or chilled RP-1 kerosene, it just uses straight up ambient. They can just load it as soon as they get to the pad, because kerosene is incredibly stable without an ignition source. So there's really not an appreciable increase in risk to just put it in there, because it's ambient, it's not going anywhere, and unless you walk up to it and open the tank and strike a match, it's not going to ignite. So they can just load it in there, it won't boil off, and then that just saves them time on launch day, and it's no safety concern like when we go out to set cameras or anything like that, because it's inert. Basically, at that point.
I've stood right next to a fueled, the RP-1 was in, right next to an Atlas rocket, and I asked the question, I was like, wait, that's fueled right now? And they're like, yeah, the SRBs are fueled, the RP-1's fueled, like, it's all fueled up, we're just waiting for the locks. And that is what's going on now with the venting there, right?
Yeah, so the venting that we're seeing right now is actually the liquid oxygen that is being vented from the Atlas core stage, the copper-colored core stage. And yeah, because on launch day, right, exactly what you're saying, right, all you got to do is put that liquid oxygen in your booster. But then the Centaur is a different story up on top. That Centaur upper stage uses liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So because those are both cryogenic, and you really don't want either of those in there until the last possible minute, you don't fuel them until launch day.
Absolutely. A lot of good questions here, y'all. It's a lot of good questions coming through the chat, so thank y'all. Again, if you've got a question for us, that's why we go live an hour before the launch, so we can answer some questions about people that are interested in the launches. So tag us in chat at NASA Spaceflight. What was up, Chris? You were jumping in?
Well, I was just going to say, if you look at this rocket right now and you get to the big pointy top, right, where the payload fairing is, if you just take that payload fairing off and pop Starliner on there instead, this is the configuration of the Atlas that we'll see in 2 months when Starliner launches, the 422. But we just don't call it the 422, we call it the N22 because it doesn't have a payload fairing, so N for no, for that first number, and then 22 for 2 solids and 2 engines on the Centaur upper stage. But in its basic form, this is what we'll see, just instead of a payload fairing, Starliner on top of it in a couple of months. Exactly.
Excellent. See, and folks, we're coming up about 23 minutes, L minus 23 minutes. Any critical updates on the launch net, Michael? Are we hearing anything? Or are they
still waiting for the anomaly team to report the status of that issue and if they have a path forward? But as of now, no other issues being worked other than that topping issue with the liquid oxygen tank on the booster.
Okay, good deal. Y'all, again,
And,
Michael, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, the only other update, weather officers were reporting as of 4 minutes ago there are no weather constraints for launch.
Excellent. So coming up in about hopefully 22 minutes, still waiting on that. And like we said earlier, y'all, we can't give you the actual audio from the Launch Control Center for Atlas. We're not allowed to broadcast that to you, but we are listening in and we'll provide you updates if we hear anything about the anomaly that they're working with, the topping off or anything. That's why I asked Michael there. He's listening in. Let's see here. Patrick Stewart says, glad to see another stream. For newbies, can you explain how and where ULA came from?
Oh, yeah. So ULA actually came about from a merger between the portions of Lockheed Martin and Boeing that built the Atlas V and Delta IV rockets. So basically, it used to be that those two companies owned the 2 rockets that ULA now operates. And basically when they were being created in the mid-90s with the Evolved Expendable Launch Vehicle program, they were supposed to be competition for each other. And then after they both kind of came online, some things came out about not great things that one of the companies was doing and trying to subvert, and there were accusations of favoritism and improper communication with blah, 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 blah. There was a whole bunch of fallout, and basically the solution was to take the portion from Lockheed that built the Atlas, take the portion take the portion of Lockheed and take the portions of Boeing, thank you, Boeing, that build the 2 rockets and merge those 2 entities together under a single organization that became known as United Launch Alliance. So that's how ULA came to be, because they came to be after the Atlases and Deltas were already flying. But that's sort of why they came into ownership of both of them. And then kind of, unfortunately, when those things merged together, it created we have 2 different rockets, but it's the same company doing it, right? So we kind of unintentionally had a monopoly here, and that has been solved, and now we have multiple other rockets here as well. But that's sort of the quick and dirty of how ULA came to be. Yeah.
All right, so just continuing to operate, I guess, some of those Atlas designs previously, and then Vulcan is going to, is this correct? Vulcan is going to be the first one that ULA actually put together themselves?
Yes.
Because they sort of inherited Atlas and they sort of inherited Delta.
Yep.
And Vulcan is the ULA rocket. So that's where United Launch Alliance came from, because they united a couple other companies to continue providing those launch services to NASA and the government and all that sort of stuff, right?
Exactly, yes.
Good deal. I'm going to keep grabbing questions here, y'all. I see the Super Chat queue filling up. I see good questions coming in. You don't have to do a Super Chat to ask a question. We try to do a balance of both. We don't ever want it to just be a Super Chat reading stream. So let's see here. Here's one from Keith saying, can Sbirs detect space debris or asteroids? It's just looking for, like, downward looking, right?
Yes, so these are not outward-looking systems into space. They look down at the planet, specifically in infrared. So they're looking for the infrared heat signatures of missile launches, is what they are designed to look for. Yeah. So in that case, they wouldn't be of help in terms of, like, planetary defense or something like that.
Right. So they're looking down at the planet, watching big heat sources come up. That's the IR part of the space-based infrared system, is what Sbirs stands for. Let's see here. We've got a super chat from Aviation 365. This is interesting, and this is like a perception thing, I think. Aviation asked, why does it seem like every ULA launch has some ground equipment failure that Falcon 9 doesn't have? It seems like every Falcon 9 has gone on time, which we know isn't true, while every Atlas and Delta always delayed, which we also know isn't true because we just got a Delta IV Heavy launched on the first attempt. So,
yeah,
what's the difference? I mean, we could talk about cadences and stuff there, right?
Yeah. So some of it has to come. Some of it does have to do with flight rate, right? The more you fly, the more your systems get exercised. The more you do static fires and pre-launch things very, very close to liftoff, the easier it is to find some things. But regardless, because SpaceX encounters these too, every single rocket has the equivalent of the light bulb incident, right? Where you could test the light bulb 1,000 times and it works, and you flick it for 1,001 and pop, off it goes.
Yep.
Right. This happens, and it happens to SpaceX. It happens to ULA. I think we see it happen more to you, or we're more cognizant of when it happens to ULA because they don't launch as much, right? Like there have been 14 or 15 launches out of Florida, so far this year since January 1st. They've all been Falcon 9s. This is the first Atlas, right? So Atlas has one scrub. It's very noticeable, but all of those 14 Falcon 9 flights have not gone on their first attempt and have encountered issues. So I think it's more just like an unfortunate perception thing because the Atlases and the Deltas don't launch that often. It seems like one-offs when they get off the pad on their first attempt, but the Atlas has a very good track record in that regard. But again, some of the things you can't find with low flight rates, right, until you're on the pad actually doing it. Higher flight rates would help.
Yep.
And that's the balance, right? And it's worth pointing out too, like, because we had a significant gap here with Atlas. The last Atlas was November of last year with a classified NROL, National Reconnaissance Office satellite. It's not because Atlas didn't have customers in the last few months. It's because those customers that were scheduled to go encountered delays and had to delay. So, like Starliner wasn't ready. And then when it was ready, we had the International Space Station that wasn't ready. So that shifts Starliner to July because this one was sitting here. There's one in June, both for the U.S. military, and they get priority, right? So off goes Starliner to July. But we've got 3 Atlases coming in 3 months. That's a good flight rate for ULA. So we'll see how that is. But yeah, really just perception. Yeah, Michael.
And really quick, they are at T-minus 4 minutes in holding at this time. That is a planned built-in hold. So we are going to expect them to have the final pull to continue with the countdown here shortly. When that happens, we will pipe that in for you.
Perfection.
Yeah, and that is that's something we should actually hear, right, Michael?
Yes, that is provided by the ULA broadcast. So we are allowed to show that part.
Good deal. So as soon as we get that go, no-go poll, we'll listen in and see what the deal is. But again, folks, today we're standing by. We're about L-15 minutes away from this Atlas V rocket. That's a United Launch Alliance rocket launching out of the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That's Slick 41 that it's at. The 4 tall towers, those are lightning towers. Chris, I see that question like scroll through chat once every 90 seconds. So the 4 tall towers are lightning towers. Those are normal towers. The building that says ULA in the foreground, that's actually where they integrate the rocket. They sort of stack it up together. It's like a mini VAB almost for this pad specifically. And then off in the background, you can see ULA on the service structure right next to the rocket, which is venting, and that payload fairing up at the top. You can see the artwork on the payload fairing. We can't really get the detail of that artwork, but you can see it. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the fairing that's made in Brownsville? Or is that the other fairing? Harlingen,
yes.
Next to Brownsville, but not in Brownsville.
Yeah.
Are those made, Michael?
Yes, they're built in Harlingen. So I think it's the fairing and the interstate adapter, if I'm not wrong, but they do make the 4-meter fairing in Harlingen. The 5-meter payload fairing is built by Ruag in Switzerland, although that manufacturing is being moved to ULA's factory in Alabama. But I also do have an important update. The teams just outbriefed the issue with topping the Atlas V booster. They have agreed to make some adjustments to the parameters, and they are now looking good for launch. So at this time, the ULA teams are working no issues.
Good deal. I'm going to translate that really quickly. They're going to adjust some parameters, and this isn't necessarily exactly what it is, but this is sort of the idea. They have a sensor, right? And when that sensor says 8, everything's good. And maybe 7's also okay, or 6 is okay, but perfect is 5. But as long as it says 8, that's good. And maybe that sensor would read 9. And they may look at it, and they may say, wow, okay, well, that reads 9. It's supposed to be 8. And the anomaly team that Michael was talking about can come back together and say, well, realistically, 10 would be okay, but we just have 8 as the parameter. And so it's reading 9, but we'll go ahead and say that's okay. We'll go ahead with the launch because we know that really 10's okay, 9's fine. We were looking for 8, but we'll go with 9. That's sort of what they do when Michael says the anomaly team convenes and then they give us a briefing on the situation. Again, I made the numbers up and I made the sensor up. That's not exactly what's going on with this rocket, but that's sort of the idea where they look at some parameter and they know that they have these buffer zones built in. They have a little bit extra capacity and they can make the decision, hey, you know something, that's okay that reads 9, even though 8 would be what we really want. We can go with 9. That's sort of what happens when we get little call outs like that. So thanks, Michael, hopping in.
Do I understand that? Because wonderfully what I heard Michael say was, I have an important update, and then dead silence over my phone.
His important update is they're working no issue. Yeah,
okay,
they're working no issues.
Because I was like, that's very mean, and it took me a minute to realize, like, oh, the audio dropped.
Yes, they cleared the topping issue on the booster.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome.
There you go. So coming up in 11.5 minutes here, folks. Sounds like ULA working no issue. Weather is looking good as well. Last update from the weather officers was everything. There's no weather constraints in play right now. So things continue to tick towards a launch in just over 11 minutes. Let me grab a couple more questions here. Aviation 365 again says, love all the work you do to bring us the coverage. By the way, been following your broadcasts ever since SN4. A longtime viewer there, Aviation. Thanks for checking in and thanks for the continued support. Daryl Long says, the SN15 shirt and sticker getting delivered today. Thanks, everyone. NASA Spaceflight. A lot of people checking in with some of our merch store things. We've got a shop. shop.nasaspaceflight.com. We've got like t-shirts and mugs and stickers for various events and, Starlink and Eat Launch Scrub Repeat and all sorts of different things that you can buy in the shop as a way to help support what we do. So appreciate people checking in there. Daryl, thank you for the super chat and getting some things out of the shop to help us keep these broadcasts up. Paul LaMadeline, $50 from Paul, by the way. Appreciate you, Paul. This is first non-SpaceX I've been able to catch before launch. Thanks for all your hard work. Well, Paul, with that vote of confidence in the tune of $50 there, we will continue to share these events with people. We have a lot of fun chasing rockets, and we hope you all have a lot of fun, well, listening to us talk for an hour before we chase rockets. I think is the way to put it. Thank you so much for the $50. That's very, very generous. Let's see here. What? We're going to be ready for ULA SpaceX battles and KSP2 multiplayer? I don't know if that's a released feature or not, but we'll see. I'm certainly anxious to see KSP2 come out and the multiplayer features available there. And then lastly, more Darren actually says, are the strap-on boosters actually physically strapped on, or what is the mechanism used for separations? I think it's springs, right?
Chris? It's yeah. They're a better term would be bolted.
Bolt-on boosters,
or mounted or side mounted. Yeah, because they're not like physically strapped to the side of the vehicle. Yeah,
it's not like ratchet straps, like you'd be
no,
like a load in the bed of a pickup or anything. That's not exactly how they work.
And a little man with a scissors going at 90 seconds. No, they're bolted on there. There are different separation mechanisms. Some rockets use pyrotechnics, some use springs. I believe the Atlas uses a system of springs that aren't pyrotechnics, because part of the reason they have to hold them so long, because they'll burn out at about 90 seconds. But then Atlas will hold on to them until 2 minutes, 1 second into flight. And that's literally so it can clear the aerodynamic area of concern so that when they pop them off, they don't reconnect the vehicle and slam into the core stage.
Yeah, I could talk extensively about the Delta IV Heavy, how those boosters are put on the side, because I had the opportunity to go through the HIF where they assemble those, they put together those Delta IV boosters, and they want us to go, oh, look at the engine, look at this big, huge rocket, and we spent like 20 minutes talking about this little box that had a frangible nut in it, and we talked with the guy that was installing the frangible nuts about how these frangible nuts work. It's literally explosives that cut a little bolted nut. They cut the nut in half, and there's a box to hold the debris so the debris doesn't impact the rest of the rocket. So we spent 20 minutes talking about that, and we're standing next to this huge rocket, and all we wanted to talk about was the exact mechanism by which this box would contain the nut dust that was left over after the nut was broken by explosives. So.
Now think about that for an inline rocket, right? They're concerned about a potential part of a bolt getting loose on an inline rocket where there's very little below it that it could hit and damage, right?
Right.
That was a heritage system from the space shuttle.
Uh-huh.
And so now imagine the hold breath factor there, where like if that bolt comes off, you've got thermal protection system fragile wings right in its flight path.
Yep.
Amazing those things worked every single time. On the bolt catchers,
It's just the craziest thing. There's this big, massive feat of engineering, this huge Delta IV Heavy that's being put together. It's horizontal, and then there's this one little detail. It's a box to contain the debris of this piece of equipment.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. They have entered an extended hold now, so I'm going to take away your countdown timer. This is not going to be. I don't expect this to be a major problem. They just have to wait a bit longer for that topping to complete. I mentioned there was a topping issue earlier. They resolved that issue, but as a result, it sounds like it's going to take a bit longer than normal to get the booster topped off. So it's going to be an extended hold past the 15-minute planned hold time, but again, I do have a feeling this is going to clear relatively soon. It's not a major thing to worry about, but we're going to stand by for an updated T0 from ULA.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Did they not do the poll?
No, they have switched to the not ready position. That's what they just said.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there's the ULA notification. Gotcha. Okay.
But that's something we can talk about, actually, because a lot of the times we have a launch going, and it's a launch going up to the ISS or a Starlink or something like that, and we're so used to these instantaneous launches where you either go now or you don't. What's our window like today? We don't just have to one opportunity to launch, right?
40 minutes. The window is roughly 40 minutes in duration, so they have until 1411, if I'm doing my math right. 1411 UTC, 1411 local time. Yeah, so 40 minutes.
Yeah. So they have a little bit of time here, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that has a lot to do with the orbit that this is going into. They're not trying to meet up with the space station, where you have a very precise launch window, and you have to launch at a specific time so that you get right in the right slot to catch up to the space station, or let it catch up to you, actually. This, because they're going up to GEO, this has a little bit more leeway in exactly what time they launch, right?
Yeah, and we can kind of see that. Like, they don't have a lot of leeway because it's only 40 minutes, and like huge communication satellites that carry a lot of propellant on board.
Yep.
Right, they get dropped off at geostationary transfer orbit, same place this one's getting dropped off into. You know, they have 4-hour-long launch windows because they have more propellant. They can do more in orbit.
Right.
This is smaller, doesn't have as much propellant, gives you a 40-minute launch window because the principle is the same, right? You're still trying to rendezvous with a specific point in space, right? Because we don't just throw these things up there and go like, okay, and it got to geostationary orbit at 130 degrees west.
Right.
No. Like each satellite in geostationary orbit has basically like a 40-kilometer box that they can operate in, and that's their geo slot, basically. And this one has its specific slot that it needs to get to. So just like going to the space station, you have to align orbital planes, you have to align longitude of the ascending nodes correctly, and that gives you your launch time, and then how much extra propellant is on board your satellite or reserved on your
sorry,
satellite.
Chris, we just got a new T0 of 37 minutes past the hour, so that's going to be 1:37 p.m. Eastern or 17:37 UTC, so only a 6-minute delay, so not much at all.
Not much at all. Very good. Very good.
I think that one was worth breaking in with. I saw the screen change. I was like, oh, the clock's
LC, ALC. Go. Countdown clock has been set for a new T0 of 17:37. Roger.
L minus 9 minutes.
LC, RC, Net 1. Go RC. New T0 is approved. Roger. Okay, all personnel, we have an approved T0 for 17:37 Zulu. LC switch to the ready position. All steps are complete prior to the status check.
And as you just heard, the clocks are now set for our new T0 of 17:37. The range is approved, the new T0, and the team is now ready to proceed with countdown. Launch conductor Scott Barney will resume his activities and conduct the poll for terminal count in just over 1 minute.
L minus 8 minutes. L minus 7 minutes.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. Atlas Systems, propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulics.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
Water.
Go.
Centaur Systems, propulsion.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Hazgas.
Go.
Electrical Systems, airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
GCQ.
Go.
Operations support.
Go.
Com.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Redline monitor. Go. Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
Launch vehicle is ready to launch.
Mission director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC. Verify T0 is set for 1737 Zulu.
Verified.
Polling is complete. The ULA launch team and the Space Force mission director are go for launch. From T-minus 4 minutes until launch, you'll be listening to Scott Barney and his team performing the final steps in the countdown procedure. You'll hear the team call out that Atlas liquid oxygen topping has been secured, followed about a minute later by the call out for transferring the Atlas and Centaur stages from ground facility power to internal battery power. At T-minus 1 minute 55 seconds, the team will command the launch sequencer to start, followed shortly by securing the Centaur liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen topping activities. At T-minus 1 minute 40 seconds, the team will command the flight control system to launch enable and arm the flight termination system. In the final minute, Atlas tanks will be verified to flight pressures, followed by a verification of Centaur tank pressures. A final status check of Atlas, Centaur, and Sbirs GEO-5 readiness is conducted at T-minus 25 seconds. At T-minus 3 seconds, the RD-180 engine will roar to life. After liftoff, you'll hear the voice of Patrick Moore providing launch vehicle ascent data.
STD, this is LC. Please re-verify spacecraft remains configured for launch.
Verified.
Roger. All steps are complete prior to terminal count.
This is Atlas Mission Control at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. We anticipate releasing the hold in just a few moments.
On my mark, the time will be T-minus 4 minutes and counting. 3, 2, 1, mark. 3:55.
The countdown clock has resumed, and we are go for launch at 1:37 p.m. Eastern Time.
T-minus 3 minutes.
Securing LO2 topping.
Atlas tanks to flight pressure.
2 minutes, 50 seconds.
FTS internal.
159,
Vehicle internal.
155,
Launch sequencer start.
150,
Securing Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO2.
140,
Launch enabled.
137,
FCS armed.
T-minus 90 seconds. The launch vehicle, payload, ground systems, and eastern range are go for launch.
120,
OCU's armed.
FCS count started.
110,
Vent valves locked.
T-minus 1 minute.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
Forty seconds,
Stable at step 3.
$25,
Status check. Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
Go Sbirs.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, Atlas ignition, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff. The United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket with the 5th space-based infrared system satellite for the United States Space Force.
Now 15 seconds into flight. PU's gone to closed loop control. Engine operating parameters continue to look good.
You are hearing the voice of Patrick Moore providing launch vehicle ascent data.
Vehicle's now completing the pitch over program. Body rates look good. Seeing good chamber pressure on both SRBs. And RD-180 now beginning the throttle bucket. Engine response looks good. And now passing through Mach 1. Atlas V is now supersonic, and Max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. Body rates continue to look good through the boost phase. Vehicle's now throttling back up slightly. Engine response continues to look good. Chamber pressure on both SRBs continue to look good. Now passing 1 minute 10 seconds into flight. Atlas is now 10 miles in altitude, 4.5 miles downrange distance, traveling at 2,000 miles per hour. 1 minute 20 seconds into flight, standing by for SRB burnout shortly. Body rates continue to look good. Chamber pressure on the SRB is now tailing off. And we have burnout on both SRBs. Atlas will hold on to the SRBs for an additional 39 seconds before jettison. RD-180 is throttled back up to full thrust. Engine response looks good. Now passing 1 minute 50 seconds into flight. Body rates continue to look good throughout the boost phase. And the Atlas V now weighs 1/2 of its liftoff weight. And standing by for SRB jettison shortly. And we have good indication of separation of both SRBs. Now just under 2 minutes remaining in the booster phase of flight. Vehicle's gone to closed loop steering, seeing a slight correction in the body rates, now damping out nicely. RD-180 engine operating parameters continue to look good. RD-180 throttling down slightly now as expected. Two minutes 40 seconds into flight. Atlas is now 39 miles in altitude, 68 miles downrange distance, traveling at 5,400 miles per hour. And the Centaur reaction control system is now pressurizing the flight levels. System response looks good. Now coming up on 3 minutes into flight. RD-180 pump speeds and injector pressures continue to look good. Body rates continue to look good. Now about 1 minute remaining until booster engine cutoff. Pump speeds and injector pressures on the RD-180 continue to look good throughout the boost phase. Three minutes, 30 seconds into flight. Atlas is now 56 miles in altitude, 160 miles downrange distance, traveling at 9,000 miles per hour. And RD-180 is now throttling to maintain a constant 5G acceleration limit. RD-180 responses look good. And Centaur's begun the boost phase chill down sequence. RD-180 now going to 4.6G throttle limiting, standing by for BECO. And we have BECO booster engine cutoff, standing by for stage set. And we have good indication of stage separation. We have pre-start on the RL-10, standing by for ignition. We have ignition and full thrust on the RL-10. Chamber pressure looks good. Body rates look good. And we have good indication of payload fairing jettison. This first burn of today's mission will last approximately 10 minutes, 30 seconds. RL-10 engine operating parameters look good. Body rates have damped out nicely from the startup transients. And the RCS system has begun the initial thruster firings for system thermal conditioning. Just over 5 minutes now remaining in, or 5 minutes now into flight. RL-10 chamber pressure looks good. Body rates continue.
This is Atlas Missions Control at T plus 5 minutes, 20 seconds. Patrick Moore just confirmed successful completion of the early phase of today's flight, and all systems continue to operate nominally. The mission is currently in the first Centaur engine burn. Our next event, Centaur main engine cutoff, will occur in approximately 10 minutes. Lockheed Martin builds the Sbirs satellites for the U.S. Space Force. Here's a video highlighting the power of these satellites.
It's 30 seconds into flight.
Last week, I had the opportunity to talk with Lockheed Martin's Melanie Young about the incredible capabilities Sbirs-5 brings to the constellation. Let's take a look at our conversation. Hey, Melanie. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Can you tell me more about what you do for the Sbirs program?
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited to be here. I am a systems engineer for Lockheed Martin Space, and I've worked in the U.S. Space Force's space-based infrared system